we have a real treat for you today. We have 4 experts that are going to share their information on Analytics and Data Summit 2023, kind of give you a preview of what you're going to see if you attend the conference. I'm Dan Valamis. I'm the conference director, and we'll be joined today by Heli and Philippe and Melly and Tim. You can see the presentations that they're going to be giving at the conference. But let me tell you a little bit about the conference, and we'll get into our panel and go through all of this. We'll keep things relatively informal here. So if you have questions, put them in the Q&A widget, or if there's general comments in the chat, and we'll put information about the conference in there as well. So you're going to get a forfer today in everything you're going to see. If you want to get more information about the Analytics and Data Oracle user community, there are lots of ways to connect with us on our website, in Slack. We tend to do a lot of stuff on Slack, just FYI. And you can join our specific channel and even post your technical questions there and have people, experts from the community, join into you. There's also, this is in a series of TechCasts. We've been doing these for, gosh, 3-4 years. And there's quite a library on them on our YouTube channel. If you click on the YouTube link on our homepage, you can see through that. You can also look through our newsletter. We have stuff on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and of course, the Spatial and Graph SIG has their special place on LinkedIn as well. This is in, we'll be sharing these presentations for you from a series of them that'll happen during the conference. And let me just show you a little bit what that looks like. If you go to andouc.org/AND Summit 2023, you'll see that there is a homepage where we feature some of the presentations, talk a little bit about the conference and sponsors, and we got to get our keynote pictures up there. We're still fleshing out some of the details. But then make sure when you look through the summit schedule, you click through these buttons Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and just looking, you can see there's 40 of these presentations as you flip through. You're only going to hear snippets of 4 of them. And if I go to Wednesday, for instance, and just drill on one, the Oracle Analytics Cloud and Server Roadmap and Integration, you can look at details, lots of information. Take a look at Thursday. We will have our Oracle feedback session and our hands-on labs where you get to have hands-on with the software yourself, bring a laptop so that you can experience that yourself. So anyway, lots of information out on the website on this. So there'll be some keynotes. We'll have Derek Hayden from Outfront Media has agreed to be our kickoff keynote. We have Chetan Osbuten from the Oracle Database Organization, and then others coming. You'll be able also to, if you're there, participate with the Oracle Red Bull Race Simulator and interact with people. This is a chance to interact with the community. So with that, let me get back and kind of start in our panel at this point and introduce Heli from Finland. She's going to be talking about data science, machine learning, 101 skills and literacy you absolutely need. So Heli, why don't you go ahead and talk about what you're going to be presenting on?
Yes, thank you very much, Dan. So I have actually a couple of presentations during the conference. The first one about machine learning is assuring you that there's no panic with machine learning. It is going to be easy for you, no problem at all. And the second presentation I will talk about today is the one I present together with Abby. And we are going to tell you some super skills that you will need. For this presentation, I actually decided that I will talk about evaluation. So even though you use machine learning or any of the tools, you still need to understand what is the best model. So when you have several models, which one is the best? So it depends on what kind of question you have. So are you doing clustering? Are you doing regression? Are you doing classification and so on? So depending what you are doing, what are the metrics available and what are the metrics that you should be thinking about? If we talk about clustering, the thing is that beforehand, we already decide we are going to divide them in 2 groups. And we tell the computer, please divide all our data points to clusters, 2 clusters. And that's what it does. But how do I know if it's a good one or not? So is this a good model or is it not a good model? Well, of course, it depends on my data. So the clustering tendency should be good enough for clustering things. So if the data is not something that I could be clustering, it makes no sense to cluster at all. But if I do decide to cluster, there's different ways for evaluation. I can do internal evaluation, which is based on the data itself. So there's a thing called internal cohesion, which means that there's a high intra-cluster similarity. So those data points that are inside the same cluster are similar to each other. On the other hand, I can also use cluster separation, which means that there's a low inter-cluster similarity. So data points from different clusters, they are dissimilar. So this is something I can use for evaluation. I can also do external evaluation. The quality of the clusters using external knowledge, well, usually some kind of labels or something like that. There's a lot of different kind of measures for that. We can talk more about this during the conference. If we talk about classification, the idea is to, as accurate as possible, classify my data into classes. So here I have decided they're going to be cats and dogs. So in clustering, I don't say they are cats and dogs. I just say there's two groups and you decide what the groups are. In classification, I say I want to have cats and dogs separated. So this line here is separating my two groups, my classes. So how do I know how well it has been classifying my data? So of course, everybody says, I want it to be accurate. Well, what does accurate actually mean? How do I know if it's accurate or not? One of the tools we will be talking about is the confusion matrix. I'm not going to details. We only have 10 minutes here to talk. But if you come to the session, we will go this in quite details. So using this data, I can use accuracy, precision, or recall, just some of the examples of my measures. Or I could use F1 score, which is a very good measure for accuracy because it can handle biased data sets. If you think about a disease that is very, very rare case, which of these measures would be best for that? Also, what about a logistic regression that looks like this? So it's not a straight line, it's this kind of S shape. For that, I probably would use thresholds. So thresholds are actually several of these matrices that we already saw, these confusion matrices. So how do I read these? What do I understand from here? What does it actually mean? And the next sentence I will talk about ROC curve, ROC curve. So how is that related to the previous slide? What does this ROC curve tell us? And what is it used for? And not to mention this AOUC, area under the curve, which is really used to compare one rock to another so that I can know which of these models is better. And this is something we will talk about. Regression is a little bit different. So in regression, I'm not trying to find the exact right number. I am trying to find a number that is close enough for the number that I'm looking for. And because of this close enough thing, I will use things like mean and median. So mean actually means the average of the data set. So I just count the sum and I divide it with the number of cases. While as median means the middle value. So the middle value of my data set. Mean is affected by outliers. So if my data has a lot of outliers, mean is affected by that, but median is not. And this is something that you should know when you are deciding things that you use for your measurements. Here's an example of my data set. I have values 1, 1, 3, 6, 7, 9, and 10. And the median here is 6, while as the mean is 5.28 and so on. So it is not always the same thing because median and mean are different things. Then we talk about standard deviation. What does that mean? It's a measure of the amount of variation. So how close are the values to the mean? A low standard deviation indicates that the values are very close to the mean, while as if it's a very high one, it means the values are very spread out. A relative standard deviation or coefficient of variation means that I'm trying to figure out how the spread is in the data in two different models. So I want to compare two different models to each other and understand which one is better. Because if I just take the a standard deviation of 2 data sets, that doesn't really tell me much. I need to have a coefficient to be able to compare them. For regression evaluations, like I said, we are trying to figure out how far are we from the mean. Mean squared error, root mean squared error, mean absolute error, R squared. This kind of tools we have available for evaluating regression. Or maybe a correlation matrix, which tells us what kind of correlation does one feature to have to another feature. So it tells how much they are correlated, and is it a negative or positive correlation. So we have all kind of tools available for evaluating the models and trying to figure out which one is the best. And this is what we will talk about in the event, and I hope you will come and hear what we have to tell.
Helly, Tim Vlamis here. This is great, and quite excited to see your presentation. Are you going to talk about, that when we're evaluating quality, sometimes there are trade-offs, right? And
yes.
So accuracy may be higher in one, but we may be trading off something else.
Exactly. That's what we are going to talk about. So the measurement you should choose depends on the use case you have. So what kind of data you have and what you are trying to find from the data. So it completely depends on that. So I can't say that you should always use F1 or you should always use accuracy. It always depends. And that's something that we will talk about in the presentation. And I hope it will be something that people learn a lot about.
Well, thank you, Helly.
Thank you.
Going through all of that. Next, we have Philippe. We had Helly from Finland. We have Philippe from France. This is a very international conference. Philippe, if you can give us a little bit of what you're going to be presenting on, if you join us for that.
Yes, sorry, I was looking for my Zoom button here. Let me share on my side. Okay, sorry about this. Bit of a glitch here, sorry.
No
Can you
problem.
see my screen?
Yep, we can see it.
Thank you very much, Dan. Thank you everyone for attending this call and having me here on the list. So I'm super excited because we are going to have a lot of content in this conference. And Oracle Analytics PM team will be represented with several sessions, which you can see on the screen here. There will be 4 sessions. And in these sessions, we will be excited to share with you the new capabilities coming in the product. And I think they are really valuable. So you will hear about data flows and data transformation on Tuesday. You will have also Gabby Rubin on Wednesday talking about the roadmap and the innovations that have happened in OEC recently and that will happen in the next year. And then I have a session on Wednesday as well, specifically about AI and machine learning features and how they bring value to your business users. And then you'll be able to try this for real in a hands-on lab on Thursday if you're interested. And that's quite exciting in my opinion. So one quick thing here about some of these new features that you can already take a look at, which is our playlist. So as you can see here on this slide, there are playlists, of which the one for January 23 is already public. So you can see it on the screen. There are quite a few features there. I'll let you go and try it out if you're interested. We are going to show obviously a little bit more than what is in this playlist in the different sessions. I'll let you pin down the URL here, the bit.ly short URL if you're interested. But we are going to talk a lot, actually in the hands-on lab, but also in the sessions about the value that Oracle Analytics represents when it brings together machine learning, AI at the fingertips of business users. So empowering these business users with the capability of consuming these techniques with no need for any coding experience, simply need to understand your business and have access to Oracle Analytics. So you can see here the little timeline showing some of these integrations. So I don't expect that you will read all of them, but the point is to say there have been a lot of new enhancements and integration in that area, bringing deeper capabilities to the hands of business users, not specifically data scientists, not specifically advanced user, but business user needing to derive insights using these techniques. So that's a lot of business value and immediate business value at a cheap cost. So two aspects to this. One aspect is the ability to integrate external machine learning and AI services into OAC. And another aspect, which I'll show a slide in a minute, which is augmented analytics, so proactively delivering advanced analytics to a business user. If I just take a second to talk about integrating external services into Oracle Analytics. So you can see, for instance, as part of the Oracle Cloud infrastructure, there's Oracle Analytics at the top here, and there are a bunch of services that exist within Oracle, within OCI, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. So you can see AI services in blue, machine learning services in gray. So you may recognize quite a few here. And the ones that just highlighted in green are already available to business user via OAC. So this is OCI Language AI, OCI Vision AI, OCI Functions, Oracle Database Advanced Analytics, Oracle Machine Learning in the database, and OCI Data Science. So as of today, as a business user myself, I can consume the output of these services and get insights out of them within minutes in Oracle Analytics without having to have any particular understanding, technical understanding of the technology and the techniques themselves. All I need to know is the data and the business case that I'm trying to solve. For example, let's take a list here of machine learning models that I could have access to as a business user. Machine learning coming from OAC at the bottom, which is what a OAC user could have designed and that I can consume. You can see them in green. But also machine learning models that have been designed by data scientists in the database in Oracle Machine Learning. Or also AI services in blue in the middle, vision, image analysis, language and sentiment analytics, text classification, OCI scripts. Or finally at the top, OCI data science machine learning model. And you know what? I don't need to know exactly what they're from. I am a business user. I just can consume this. So I go in a data flow, simply apply an AI model to my data. And this is my own data, which is in the data flow here. And I get a data set as a result out of this without any further details needed. And with this data set, I can understand and analyze the sentiment, positive, negative, neutral, whatever, of my data. And I can build visualizations that help me make business sense of this. There are many more other services that are available here, so I'll show you this in the session. I mentioned augmented analytics as well. Oracle Analytics now provides you with a lot more advanced analytics proactively. That's an example of segmenting. So you can see different segments represented by bubbles. Segments are a group of records that explain, in this case, how many persons were in an accident. So the system provided me with these segments. I can segment attributes as well. And with this, I can simply click on the tick mark. You may see the tick mark here on that selected slide chart, and bring this directly in my canvas and make immediate sense of what the algorithm has found behind the scenes. So you see the yellow dots or the orange dots here belong to the segment. Maybe you can't read it, but this says what belongs to this segment versus what doesn't belong. And clearly the business data is different, but this definition of this segment was made automatically by the augmented analytics. So come and join us to see more than this. How about AutoML capability in OAC? So I know even less than you think. I am not even able to train a model here. So give me an AutoML node that does this for me. How about representing geometrical data without having to mess up with layers in OAC? Just drag and drop a geometry field within OAC and let it do the job and represent the data on the map. How about having proactive auto insights being completely configurable? select measures that I want and attributes, but also select visas that I want to show in the list. All of this is a few weeks or a few months away, and I'll be excited to share all of this with you in my session. So I'll stop because I think I'm reaching the top of my time here. Thank you very much, everyone.
Philippe, hi, this is Heli. Can I ask you
Heli.
something?
Yes.
I'm really excited about hands-on lab because that looks like I have a lot to learn, but can you promise me I can use the March release of it? Or is it going to be the January one? I'm looking forward to this AutoML here that you were just showing.
I think it's going to be none of them. I think
it's going to be a special one.
It's going to be the May one. How about that?
Really?
Really? So you see, I suspect that you got that AutoML little feature, and we're going to try to have this for you on that hands-on lab.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. I'm going to be there for sure.
Thank you very much. Thanks for that question, Heli. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, well, thanks, Philippe. And that's actually something I wanted to highlight, but Heli, you beat me to it. You want to actually see where the software is heading. You want to make sure you come to Analytics and Data Summit. You know, we purposefully cut each of the speakers down to 10 minutes. There's no way they can give their sessions in 10 minutes. So if you want to see the rest of this and have it make a little more sense, you have to come to the conference. The next person we have is Melly, who's going to talk a little more about Graph Studio. So Melly, if you can unmute your microphone, share your screen. Tell us a little bit about what you're going to talk about with Graph Database and Analytics, if you would.
Thank you, Dan. Like my fellow presenters here, I'm also very excited to, I'm excitedly looking forward to the event in March. One reason is because we will be meeting in person after 2 years of not being able to do so. And meeting in person is always a great place to make connections, have all of these interesting conversations, and so on. So speaking of connections, graphs are all about connections and finding out all kinds of interesting things about your data by looking at how your data is connected. So we have several sessions at this event. I will just talk about a couple of them. And what I'm going to do in my session is to try and highlight how you can trace connections in your data by modeling data as a graph. And I will be using a specific example, but I also hope to make it general enough that it's applicable to various different scenarios. So looking at just a basic example, just to kind of get the concept across, is you have data probably in tables, and you have questions such as is entity A connected to entity I, which I can figure out by looking and doing some self-joins on this table, or if you have multiple tables, doing joins across tables. But when you model your data as a graph, it kind of becomes instantly obvious that, oh, there is a connection between A and I. This goes through D and E and G. And not only that, you can see that there are multiple connections between A and I. It goes through A, D, E, and G, or it goes through A, B, and C and reaches I. And in my session, like I said, I'll be talking about some actual use cases. I'll work with one use case and then highlight how this is applicable in multiple use cases. Now, continuing on the theme of connections, if one were to ask a question in the data, is A directly connected to C? And we don't see an edge between A and C, but there is an edge from A to B to C. So A and C are indirectly connected, not directly connected. And these are the kinds of things that graphs are really good at identifying. Is there an indirect connection? How many hops away is this connection, and so on. So let's now look at the one specific example that I'll be talking about in March, and which basically uses the metadata in the database to try and see how you can identify which users can have privileges on which data entities. So what happens when you're granting privileges and roles is you can very quickly have a lot of nesting. So you have, let's say, a privilege granted to a particular table. That could be part of a role. And then another DBA might create another role that uses this role, and so on. You can virtually have unlimited levels of nesting. And then you could lose track of who has access to what data. So an ability to trace this, to find out which user has access to which data, one way to accomplish that is to model the data in these metadata tables as a graph. And the graph would look something like this. You have users as entities, roles, and privileges. These are entities, are also known as vertices in a graph. And then you have the relationships between user and role is the has role relationship. And then they have the has priv relationship, and so on. And you can see a lot of self-directed edges around the role vertex. So because roles can include other roles and so on. So this is a model of the graph that you could create from the data in these metadata tables. And once you do that, you can do things like ask graph queries of this from this graph. You can see here in bold. So this is an example of a graph query. And you can see here it's a SQL-like language, and it has the match pattern in the middle line here. And you can see here the bolded part is basically saying, find me all connections from a user to a role, and I can go through multiple levels of nesting. The plus sign here indicates one to many levels of nesting. So I just want to traverse this path as far as I can go to find at the end all the roles that this user has by virtue of nesting, and from there I want to derive what privileges that user has. And our Graph Studio tool that you can use to get started with all of this very easily also has an integrated visualization component that you can use to then execute this query, get the results, and kind of show them visually in something like this. And you don't always have to only look at the visual. You can look at a table listing of your results. You can see here that this particular user, Grindelwald, has these chain of roles, app role 1, app role 2, app role 3, and so on. And from there, you can figure out which tables this person has access to. And again, here's a slightly different query where we're saying for every user, look at 1 to 5 hops away. So this is the kind of thing that Graph makes it easy for you to do. You can say 1 to many, 1 to 5. I want to find everything that can be reached from this particular vertex, in which in this example is a user. So this has implications in financial services industry, in manufacturing, and so on. So some of my colleagues are going to be talking about graphs as well. And my colleague Giant, also on the product management team, will give you a preview of our plan for Oracle Database 23c, where we have support for using SQL to query property graphs. So the examples I was showing now was the property graph query language, because the SQL standard was not yet there. So in SQL 2023, the standard will include the ability to create property graphs and query property graphs, and that's what we will be also talking about. And finally, the last interesting session is there's also the concept of RDF graphs, which is a different graph model from the property graph model that I was talking about. And that has lots of applications in the world of data sharing. And my colleague Jason from Oracle Energy and Water is going to be talking about how they're using knowledge graphs and ontologies to share data coming in from different entities. You can see here different utility companies. Each of them has their own schema, their own format. And how do you bring all of this information together and munch it all together so that it becomes an asset that can be shared easily for benefits for everyone. And with that, I think, Dan, that brings me to the end of what I wanted to share here.
Hey, Melly, this is Philippe. may I take a second? Because I think your topic is just fascinating. We're so interested in being able to consume this as business users, and that's exactly what you're showing here. Are you going to? So I'm a fan of this, as you can hear. But are you going to talk about Studio as well in your session, and how the interface that it can represent for users like me who don't know all that SQL, but can use it with Studio?
That's a great question, Philippi. And definitely, we will be talking about Graph Studio. It's something that's available with Autonomous Database. And as you said, it is geared more towards a low-code environment where you can create a graph using the automated modeling tool. You can have a notebook where you can run queries. It just makes it easy to get started with graphs. So I will definitely be talking about that, and we'll be using Graph Studio in a hands-on lab as well. So I'm hoping people can join us for that too.
Fantastic. Can't wait. Thanks a lot, Melly.
Thank you, Philip, and thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Melly. Appreciate the intro to what you're going to talk about, the preview. Next, we have on the docket Tim Valamis, yes, my brother. And Tim, you're going to talk about, I think, data visualization, something that's near and dear to both of our hearts. And give us a little preview, if you would, of what you're going to be talking about at the conference.
Yeah, so thanks, Dan. Indeed, we're going to be talking about data visualization using Oracle Analytics and covering a lot of different topics and a lot of different examples. It'll be a combination of Dan, Jonathan Clark, and me, so we'll probably even disagree some in front of each other, as we usually do.
We tend to interrupt each other whenever we present together.
Yeah,
We're fun that way.
That's what happens with brothers. So overall, what we're going to be using is kind of this model that suggests that what we have are different requirements, different perspectives on how we design dashboards and how we think about them. And so there's a strong need. Of course, content is king. Always we're trying to share data objectively so that people get actionable insights from them. And the way they get those insights is by doing comparisons. And so comparisons become very important so that we have, a context, if you will, for that particular content. So these three in the top work very, very closely together so that we can reveal some type of decision that someone from looking at the dashboard, wants to make. Equally important is choice. So what we find is people that interact with dashboards tend to engage with them much more, tend to get a lot more value out of them. And so when they're able to make choices, particularly through filters and through drills and through hovers and things like that, that greatly raises their engagement level. Now, categorization is a little bit about the organizational strategy that you use when you're designing your dashboards. And we do have some hints and some tips, some frameworks on how to think about and organize these very, very large, complex data models that we tend to see in enterprise. And then connection really gets to drill paths and how we navigate through these dashboard systems. So with that, Dan, if it's all right, I'm just going to share an example.
Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead. Hey, I'm going to go ahead and give everybody a heads up. We're going to ask you if you're going to be attending the conference. We're getting a poll ready so stick around for that, but keep going, Tim.
Yeah. So this is an example of a dashboard that we've created, as this is actually just one piece of it. We have a lot of different tabs on here, but what we're looking at is we're looking at a company that has products in 3 different categories: technology, office supplies, and furniture. And in particular, we want to look at profitability. So what we're diving into here is which of these product categories and which of these products are contributing significantly to the profit or the bottom line of the firm. Now, And so usually in dashboards, we have a combination of visualizations. Here we have a bar graph, that just gives the summary information about the categories. We have a table that lists the actual profit and sales for the product categories and the product subcategories and whatnot, so that you can scroll down and look up specific line items. And then we have these scatter plots where, typically what we'll do is we'll put, the dependent variable and the independent variable on different axes where, our independent variable typically goes on the X, dependent on the Y. So we're looking here, we're looking at profitability as it varies by sales. So sales is a given and profit is what's varying. So that way we can know, for sales volume, where do we expect profitability to be, and where these different products land within that scatter plot. And here we're looking at the profit ratio, or the profit margin, if you will, as it varies by profitability as a discrete amount, so that we can get a sense of, how much profit these products are contributing, or in this case, negative profit, and then what that ratio is, to sales. So, so these combination of views can start to help us identify outliers and get some insights. Now, one of the things that we want to talk about choice, and one of the things that we'll be highlighting in the presentation, is where do you put your filters? And so here, this is typically what we might find, where if we also have some customers who's buying the products, we want to be able to interrogate that and whatnot. You might see this as the product categories are here in drop downs, but what we find is, and we put the customer segments up here, what we find actually is kind of a recommendation is that we would flip-flop these and actually organize our customer information over here on the left and put our product category, subcategory, product name, filter choices on the top, and then facilitate, you turn on the use a graph as a filter, so that if we wanted to interrogate just technology, we can do that simply by using the graphs as choices, okay? And that way we will kind of reveal the insight for the categories without even having to work with these choices here and have them drop down. So this is something here, we're actually using a list on the left so that we can make a choice if we want to look at our customer segments, for example, and we want to look at the intersection of, okay, what are our consumers choosing? Again, we have this as a list, as a filtering device, so that we can make a choice and we can see all of these at the same time. We also have the ability to put drop downs in the canvases as well. Sometimes people like, the drop down prompt view. What we find is with large lists, they work pretty well. With smaller lists, we're far better off using a list view as we have here, so that you can see all your choices at once.
So I want to point out that often people think in terms of data visualization via the vises themselves. This gets into the layout of the actual canvases, of the dashboards, all that type of stuff. It even gets into what measures do you use, for instance, the scatter plots that Tim's showing on that. What measure do you use is the X and Y axes of these. It's not just what colors do you use, it's how do you lay it out on the screen, and that greatly affects the perceptions that people get from looking at the data.
Yeah, I would also say we kind of jumped into the middle of the presentation. So there are a number of summary canvases we have in advance. So once we kind of get into this product profitability type view, we're actually looking at, a richer visualization so that we'll feel free to add context, like what are the sales for the different profitability contribution levels, things like that, and scatter plots and some more advanced visualizations. One of the things that that's an alternative is, actual placement of the the visualizations. One of the other, is what do we do with color? So if we want to highlight these segments and differentiate and point out which customer is actually in which segment, we can add color to this. Now this, Dan, gets into—
Really?
Yeah.
All
Well, so this is a trade-off, okay? So what we're doing here is we're calling strong visual attention to this customer segment and this customer name, so that as we're, working with these different products and we want to find out, oh, which one did, Kelly Burton purchase, and it's up here, we can find that, we can find it's in the middle here, or Andrew Levine right here. We can find those things visually quite quickly, even though when we have a very, dense graph. Obviously, if we just filter it to consumers, we're all going to get all our only consumers, and we don't have as many members in the scatter plots. But so what we'll talk about is it worth the visual energy it takes to use the colors over here? That is a design choice, that we often wrestle with and are looking to start to understand. So here we can see that, what we have is a bar chart that can also act as a filter. So if we want to look at consumers, we can actually see, okay, profitability, how much do they have? What are the different categories of segments, and what are the different products within those segments? So the other thing we like is when we do get questions from the audience about why did you do this? Why didn't you do that? What is this showing? Those kinds of issues are a lot of fun to discuss in a group. And what we find is it's often similar to the kinds of questions we get, in actual client engagements, so that, kind of everybody shares in that. What choices are we making? What trade-offs are we making when we make those choices? And how do you present alternatives so that we get different views and we understand the trade-offs that exist between them?
So, Tim, quick question or other comment on the trade-offs and so on. The
Yeah.
one thing we often have to work through with graphs is that what do you do when you have a lot of data? Like how do you visualize it on screen in a way that's meaningful? And it kind of came through in many things that you said, like you don't have a very long list, and you don't use too many colors. Like if we use like a dozen colors, then it loses its the impact. So I wondered whether you have any other insights on how you grapple with that, taking lots of data but making it, summarizing it well. So with the trade-offs with some trade-offs, I'm sure.
Yeah, thanks, Helly. It's a great question. And what we find is certain graphs are better at displaying large numbers of elements. So if we look at the scatter plot for example, this can show many data points. And really what we're looking at is we're looking at the distribution of them and for outliers and whatnot, so that, other types of graphs also do very well with large amounts of data. Some graphs don't, pie graphs, they're good for, some people say don't ever use them. There are a lot of problems with pie graphs, but any more than what you fingers on one hand, numbers of pieces, you really don't get a useful insight from them. So it really depends on the graph style, why you're using it, where you're using it. For example, and there are a number of issues related to human cognition, interpretation of the data itself from the graph that we have to be aware of. So something like a tree map may be good for a navigation aid, So that tree map shows different size rectangles or squares related to the data size. So we could do that with this if we took away one measure. But what happens is, you know, the way the brain processes size and position is not well represented in the tree map. So
I'll also
it's a
add
trade.
on, Tim and Melly, that I just saw a feature that's in the OAC recent release where we can control the dot size on maps. And that will enable us to use maps to display. It's very effective. I think it was Philippe that showed in a recent demo, if you make the dot size real small, you can show lots and lots of data as points on a map. It's very effective to show that type of stuff in handling large amounts of data. And that one feature of being able to control the dot size really helps us with that. Otherwise, it just gets overwhelmed.
Yeah, so for example, if we change to a bar graph on this, we're going to find that we lose some of our, our ability to see the real distribution of this data along this particular axis of profit. And what we should do is take off sales so that we're only looking at one measure, So that's kind of how we start to learn how to remove sales to tooltip. And now we can start to get a sense of the distribution, but we have too many products here, and there are many, many more lines than we have listings. So it becomes problematic just because of the sheer number of members of the set. So yeah, it's a challenge. Thanks for bringing it up. All right, so Dan, I think we'll look forward to a great session and lots of good questions.
Well, thanks, Tim. Appreciate you running through all this. Pause for just a moment, and then I want to, let's see, do we have a poll that we can fire on this, Carrie?
Dan, there's also a question in the Q&A panel.
Oh, okay, great. Let me handle that while we fire the poll. The question that I have here is, are you joining us at the AnDOUC Summit 2023? And we tried to add several different answers to try and get, it's not just a yes, no. So if you would all would just analyze, vote on this, whether you're going to register, we'll register later. I'll point out that the early bird registration deadline is January 31st to save. I can register later, maybe depends on price, travel policy, probably not or no. And then also we know that we have some sponsors on here. By the way, if you're interested in sponsoring, we do have a few sponsorship packages still available, and you can join us that way.
So I'll let Philippe take the question on variables or parameters and data visualization. I will say that we often build, custom formulas, and we have other ways around this issue that we're using quite a lot. But Philippe, do you want to address that?
Yes, there is a feature that is about to ship. This fiscal year within Oracle for parameters, so basically variables in DV. Not exactly the same way that we used to have it in Classic, but that will address your question, Tim, and I'm assuming Ashok, your question as well. Otherwise, connect with me via email and we'll look at your use case. But it's about to ship soon.
Okay. Let me go ahead and set some closing thoughts on this as we kind of transition to this. This is what the schedule looks like, kind of. If you go to andouc.org, AD Summit 2023, you'll see 40 sessions listed. It's not just the ones that we talked about today. And we have a QR code so you can get on there and register for the conference March 14th through 16th. We'll have more information where you can network with other people. That's kind of one of the big things here, and the Thursday feedback session. We also have the top 5 reasons to attend AnDOUC Summit, 3 days focused just on analytics and data. It's not just a general purpose Oracle conference. we're focused on this specific area that we think probably attracted you to this webinar. We have focused tracks on analytics, machine learning, spatial, graph, and data lakehouse. Those are the areas we're focusing on. It's an intimate, engaged community and has customers, partners, and Oracle all together there. And, relatively small. You think, somewhere between 200, 500 people, something like that at the conference. There's no marketing in these types of sessions. It's just technical stuff, hands-on labs, and you can get dirty with the data. So come join us. And yes, we know we put in 6 bullet points for the top 5 reasons, kind of an inside joke on here. We'll hope that you can join us and join us for the series of TechCasts on all sorts of topics. You'll find more of it on AnDOUC.org. With that, any other, and I want to thank all of our panelists and people that are going to be presenting at the conference. Any closing thoughts from any of them before I close us out?
Oh, really looking forward to meeting you all in person, and thank you very much, Dan, for having this session here.
Okay, super. I see a question that came up. Hey, when is it and where? I'll just repeat that in case people missed it. March 14th through 16th, 2023 in Redwood Shores at the Oracle Conference Center. You'll find all the information at andouc.org/AND Summit 2023. We have that in the chat as well. You can click on the link there, hopefully. But thank you, everybody, for joining for this webinar. And we'll see you again in another few weeks on the for AnDOUC TechCasts. Bye.